13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
And there it is.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah, that was fitting for Veterans Day episode. His being brought up, his experience as a military child and living on different bases and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting guest. I'm astounded at your curating capabilities, Mr. Bill.
Yeah, I'm starting to be surprised. I'm starting to surprise myself too. I don't know. I try not to worry about what guests I'm going to book next or who's going to, how long can I keep the show going. It's just, kind of letting the universe take care of it as it rolls along. So yeah, Tom, like I said, I found him through Jerry's show, Nox Mente. And they talk about dreams, and it's an interesting episode. Check it out.
You've been on Nox Mente?
No, I have not.
You should. Why haven't you? I've been on Nox Mente.
I did not know that. Yeah, I don't know. Dreams, it's something I can, I can't remember them after I have them. So how can I talk about them?
Yeah, I had the same problem when I went on too, and it turned out to be an interesting discussion anyways. But, Nish and Jerry are great, so it's kind of hard not to have a good discussion when you sit down with those two.
Yeah, for sure. So that's how I discovered Tom. Well, then of course Keats, his son, is on Cruising with Steak periodically, or has been. So, and then once I heard that he interviewed Robert Anton Wilson, that's like one of his accolades or whatever, that immediately got me interested. And then that's when I listened to Jerry's show and whatnot. So I've got a couple of Robert Anton Wilson's books, and so in the whole synchronicity thing, it's just everything's like falling into place and jiving where it needs to be right now. So yeah, that was a great episode. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I hope that Adam, I know that I know that had to be fun for you, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Pretty well, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm always interested in diving into these intellectual weeds. I think it's really important. I think when you look at science and you look at just your experience, look at your own experience and try to frame it in different ways, and you'll start to see the world in different ways. Kind of jump into a little bit of the flavor, but it's like people don't think they've had paranormal experiences. And then you ask somebody, have you ever been thinking about somebody that you haven't seen or talked to in a while, and the phone rings? That's precognition. That's a paranormal experience. So right now are we dealing with, you're receiving information, telepathy? Are you doing receiving information from the future? Well, these are pretty amazing things. Allow your mind to sit in that science of your experience and go, well, science tells me this doesn't work. Okay, well, it does now, and start looking at all this other crazy science, right? Because you find it's no longer crazy to you anymore. And wow, open your world, open your reality. Don't lock yourself into this social cage that you've been convinced of. And this was a really fun conversation. It seemed to really chase down all those alleys that, even if you don't, or I should say, even if none of these things we spoke about are real, right? They give you a multitude of what I find to be valuable worldviews, because they filter out and let me see what's really important. Which will make sense after you listen to the podcast.
Right. Yeah. Tom talked about personal, or, the human intuition as part of, alongside artificial intelligence, as one of the things that makes him curious. And you talked about everybody has probably had some kind of experience with premonition. And so just taking that example, looking at situations or things like that, like precognition, and then recognizing it, acknowledging it, and then just trying to find out ways to develop like those other aspects of your intuition. Like that's what's really interesting to me.
Yeah,
And
and we also talked about rules being different for other people in your reality, which I think is a fundamental thing. Do a Google search to find out if dowsing rods are real or if they work, right? Well, I know that they work for me, and I know that there's certain people that they work for. I think it's a physiological thing. And I know this because I can put an electrical cord, putting out a high magnetic field on the ground, give you two bent pieces of ceiling wire or other piece of metal, and it will move while you hold it with you doing nothing. Once you experience that Google search doesn't matter. The scientific research doesn't matter. The statistics don't matter. You know it works. And, after you do that, okay, this is very simple. We can replicate it in the strung. Now let's start, going for water pipes, things that where they're marked. Well, okay. You're this amazing scientific instrument that can't be described by science. And it took you interfacing in a certain way to be able to utilize it. The world has so many more of those things that can be powered by the way you think, the things you do, the way you interact with the world around you. And so we really got into just a lot of those discussions, and I'm definitely going to be, jonesing to edit or listen to this one again because, I don't know. I find a lot of benefit when I can get my mind outside the worldview that, media, entertainment, and, society has curated for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's beneficial, I think, in any time that you can do that. But speaking of interacting with the world, you can interact with us through our free Discord server. It's a big chat room with a bunch of channels that I have made and post interesting content on. You can also make an account and interact with your favorite podcast hosts, us, hopefully. I'll be there. The listeners are showing up. Some of them are more and more people are starting to trickle in, and it is free. And you can also find the bonus content feed there, which is also free. Everything is free. We are value for value. So check out the Discord to get the bonus feed. A lot of the times, I feel like the bonus questions. I don't know. Sometimes there's lots more content behind the bonus wall, so to speak, that is really worth checking out if you just, get the normal feed and only listen to the 13 questions. The other 7 questions that we have.
We've talked about
there's some quality content
perceptions,
there.
Bill. We've talked about perceptions, especially on this episode, and like with other guests, this things living in the space in between. And, this thing existing in between. And I find it very interesting that when you get to these questions, we have a break and there's a difference between the regular questions, the official serious questions, if you will, or whatever, and in the bonus. And I wonder if there's something to that being that break and that divide in that somehow that changes the playing field, the garden, the soil, the whatever we're interacting with, and it influences the way the questions present themselves, or maybe not present themselves, but the way that the answers manifest is probably the best way to say it. Different soil, different ideas.
Yeah, different ideas come from different people, and that's what we're trying to get with the Discord community. Well, and as many people in there as possible, so we can all figure this thing out together, right?
That's right. And when you sign up there, you'll get access to the second round of questions. Free little link. Head on over to 13questionspodcast.com. And you get links there as well. Or if you would like to support the show, Bill and I spend a lot of time and effort. If there's a little gap in the editing there, a release, that's because we're living our lives and supporting the show from our pocketbooks in time and money and effort. And you guys can help us do that and support it. And, it's value for value. Whatever this is worth to you, that's all that we ask. Whether it's, contributing, bringing more knowledge to the world, connecting in the chats. There's so many things that you can do, and you can do all that through the website. Get links to the Discord, support links, and of course, once you go there, access to the extra episodes, and you can talk to us direct. Right? It's pretty easy. You just find our little avatar, click on @Adam or an @bstrut, and we will magically appear to speak to you.
Yeah, and guys, I kind of went on a little rant in the server earlier today about supporting your favorite content producers, especially independent content producers, because as I don't know, it just seems like as we move forward in this crazy time, that censorship and the things of that nature are becoming more and more noticeable. And I think that it's important to show your support to your favorite content creators in order to encourage them to keep going if they do run into censorship problems. I'm not saying that we will or have or are expecting to, but I mean, it really is important to let those creators know that you appreciate them, and it really is voting with your money or voting with your dollars. So if it's not this show, pick some shows and donate, like even if it's just $1 a month, because it's not the amount that you donate, it's the fact that you are donating and you are supporting. If everybody gives, $5 a month or whatever, it doesn't take that many people to really make change the trajectory of a show or the future or whatnot.
Be selfish. That's what I say. I think of my favorite band, Arcade High. I've been given permission to use his music on any project that I work on. You can go on YouTube. You can find it and download it and listen to it. He makes it very available anywhere. Every time he produces something, I'm buying his album. I'm going on Bandcamp. I'm purchasing it. I want more music. I want him to be a professional musician. I want more of this. I mean, why wouldn't I? Yeah, I want to help you, but at the same time, I realize that, you can't work at Apple and be a full-time musician. Do you imagine if Rolling Stones was only doing what they did on the weekends after work when they could? I mean, you wouldn't have the body and the quality and the evolution of work. And that's really what I want to see in my content creators, Disney, you've had your run. Let me see where these other guys can go.
Exactly. Give the small guys a chance. So yeah, that brings us to our gratitude segment, and we are still waiting there. We're gonna manifest a jingle for this segment. Gosh darn it, it's gonna happen. Not sure when that'll happen, but I've got my hopes up. So yeah, what am I grateful for today? I went to the antique store today on I don't want to say a whim, but it was an impulse, and I bought a couple of gemstones of some big hunks of amethyst and labradorite. And I don't know, it's just been
that is my favorite stone, Bill.
Which
favorite stone? Labradorite.
Oh yeah, I'm holding a little tiny chunk that broke off right now.
Oh my gosh, I love it when it's perfectly polished. I have a few pieces, and Native Americans would use it as like a gazing stone, and it's beautiful because you can see that translucidness through it, and it's got that kind of that sheeny holographic film that goes through all the colors, but it's kind of like bedded in that deep, like foresty green. Love that stone. Yeah,
it is very pretty. So yeah, I've been just kind of learning more about that world, the mineral world, and finding some inspiration in it. And it's not really anything, that's not really something I've taken seriously up until recently.
Well,
so yeah,
everything in the universe is structure and patterns, right? And when you look at crystals, I mean, what's so fascinating about them is their patterned quality and how they work. And you just look at so many different aspects of what we do in physics and how we create objects that, there's deep functionality in like piezoelectrics and different things that are functioning on a crystal matrix. It's in the patterns and how things are arranged. So, much in like we got into discussion of all these other real world things that are kind of outside of that science in the quote unquote paranormal. If we're seeing these qualities be beneficial in the scientific world, why couldn't there be qualities of these things being beneficial towards some sort of other technology that's more related to consciousness or some sort of field near your body? I mean, why does it have to be just standard electrical signals? Why can't it be the magnetic signals emanated from your body? So anyways, what I'm saying is, from my scientific, spiritual mind, I don't see, because the science can't understand how this other natural technology would work, that it doesn't. So what's your experience? Jesus, man, even if it's just placebo, the most powerful, effect that, works better than the drugs being sold on the market, I'm cool with it. I'm cool with it. If a piece of the earth that looks really cool manifests a physical benefit in your life,
go for it.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, yeah, it's been fun. And yeah, I'm grateful for that, I guess.
Well,
in a way.
I'm very grateful for what we jumped into a lot on this, which was worldviews, being able to shift your view and change your perspective. And when you can do that, we gave a couple examples like the asteroid coming, Do politics matter? Is there going to be a race war? These are being able to push my mind into all these alternate scenarios, the weird ones, the AI, the simulation theory, and I mentioned it in the show. What does it matter if the world is flat if we're in a simulation? Well, putting my mind into all these things, it kind of filters out the really important things in life, the mind cages that society has, taught me to think are important. And I think it's very beneficial just to be able to remove yourself from that lens and try on some other filters, because it's really done it's been beneficial in boiling down the important things in my life.
Yeah. It's lots of, I don't know, just when the time of this recording, lots of viewpoints, different perspectives of the world coming in together and clashing. And so yeah, it's I like one of the quotes I'll probably take away from this episode. Tom said something that the worst. I scrolled right to it in my notes. The ego is the worst trait to bring to a problem-solving group.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's verbatim, but yeah. So just keep that in mind when you encounter somebody that doesn't see things the way that you do.
And I'm really glad that we had that talk with them, because until this discussion, I've not had any good view, hope, realistic aspect of AI being beneficial. But when we started getting into those core threads that run through things, through humans, through manifestations in the AI that we're seeing, it was a really hopeful, rosy, sunny type of a conversation. And yeah, it's really great to be exposed to that. So guys, if you're in the Terminator mindset, you may end up coming out of this in one word: Terminator brings you a bag of books.
Yeah. And I didn't mention this, but it's probably a good thing to throw it in the intro, because when I first started kind of digging into what Tom's all about, I had the same preconception about transhumanism being, the Terminator bad mindset, and this, he just completely flipped it around, and now, I've changed my perception of it. It's not all bad. So yeah, I think everybody's going to enjoy the.
Isn't that great? We just realized that we were throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We never saw the baby, and thanks to Tom, we realized there's a cute little baby in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So enjoy the chat, guys.
Yep, it was a good one. Enjoy your chat with Tom Ross. All right, we are now recording officially. There we go. All right, Tom. Well, anyways, it's nice to meet you. I'm glad to have you here. Bill's been very good at bringing in really interesting guests. So I don't want to say you have a lot to live up to, but I'm excited for your answers tonight.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I just think that the whole transhumanist thing is just such an interesting topic to look at, and I like your spin on it with cultivating empathy within humans too, to kind of put a spotlight on the positive side of, I guess, I don't know if positive is the right word or not, but
try to
I just
alleviate the fear.
There we go.
Yeah, that's a big push for me.
So, yeah. Anyway, Adam.
All right, Tom. Well, welcome to the show. You ready to jump on in?
Yeah, let's do this.
Sweet. People already know who you are. They'll read the bio and everything, and then so you'll have a nice little introduction ahead of this.
Cool.
Unless there's anything that you wanted to say to the audience, like off the bat.
No, I just really liked the idea that you guys have here, and I think it's really important right now. There's so much going on, and especially people my age, a little bit older men, midlife crisis type deal. It's very useful to commiserate or just to see how other people are handling situations. And so that's what I really took from some of these questions. It really kind of grounded me in a lot of ways.
Good.
Timing is perfect.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, Tom, what was the best advice ever given to you? And would you modify it at all today?
In a practical way, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from my mother. I was in my early 20s and I was out in the world and kind of overwhelmed by bills and all these new responsibilities. And it was just kind of, again, overwhelming. And she gave me the advice is, just make a list. It's that simple. And even I learned that even if the list lists so many more things than you assumed would be there, just having it in one place that you can refer to is just such a load off. It empties it out of your head. It makes it less scattered. And that was really some of the best practical advice that I've got.
That's interesting. I love that. I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday, that one of the greatest pieces of technology we've ever had is the ability to record stuff on paper. That exact thing. It's this external hard drive that has really driven everything that we've been capable of. So, that's practically is huge advice, but even for humanity, to me, that's the most important technology we've ever had. Just pen and paper, or, recording.
Yep. That's the extended mind theory, right? Post-it notes are technology, and it's just unloading so much debris. It helps us defrag our brains in a way. So that was a really good piece of practical advice. And there's something I've picked up also in a more ethereal way, is the idea that, and I use it in a lot of different ways, and it's a good thing to meditate on. That was a very practical piece of advice I got from my mother. And I don't remember where I picked this one up, but it's the idea that you don't really fall in love with a person. You fall in love with who they think you are. And that's why things can go bad, is because you start seeing that they're noticing you as somebody different. So anyway, that was just kind of a neat kind of thought experiment I've always kept in mind.
Well,
you fall in love with who the person thinks you are, and you try to aspire to be that person.
No, that's beautiful. We've had previous guests talk about relationships, in that the relationship between you and anybody, it lives in the middle, even with words and language. I have this idea of what something means. You have this idea of what something means. And then in the middle, there's this thing. And that's really our relationship. It's not within me. It's not within you. It's in that central agreement. So yeah, that's hugely introspective, especially in a relationship aspect.
Yeah. And I think that's where it'll be easier for people to fall in love with AI or with robots one day. Because it is, like you just said, it's that relationship in the middle. It's who they're seeing you as, and there's not a whole lot of messiness, of intent and motives in another person's brain. But that's a side thought.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. But to go back to the list part, I was kind of thinking earlier this week about how, like, just a simple act of writing stuff down and making a list is breaking down like a goal into steps, and that creates a plan. So like I love how that's something concrete and actionable that people can use as a tool to kind of like manifest their own reality
Yeah.
if they're going after a goal or a dream. Or
It's been very helpful, even if the list is longer than you assumed. It's very helpful.
awesome.
What was the most important lesson you learned from your parents?
Well, I gave this one some thought. And it's appropriate today because of being Veterans Day. My father was military, and he taught me very young about how irrelevant race is. Because we lived on bases and we just all played together, and there was no, even though it was the 60s and 70s, there was really no consciousness of the race relation issue in America at the time. And I became aware of it, when Roots came out, you know, back in those days. And he taught me very young how irrelevant it is, that the only color that matters when you're on the battlefield is red. He said he's had men from all different races as Americans, at his back, and vice versa. And so that's really sunk in very early, and it's a very relevant lesson I've been thinking about a lot lately, for obvious reasons. And and so that was very important to learn from him, was just how irrelevant race is and all this stuff. And from my mother, I really learned about enterprise, about being industrious. She was always busy. Now he did tours of Vietnam, and he was always stationed overseas, so he wasn't really in the house until my last year before leaving for college. And so that's why I can remember certain pieces of advice he gave me so pristinely. But with her, she was always busy. She was always doing something and starting a business, and so she taught me to be industrious. On the flip side, she kind of taught me how not to parent in some ways, because every month when the bills would come in, or she'd get to some certain point of being very anxious about finances or whatever, we felt it. And, we would see her very upset, once a month or so. And it meant there was just a very kind of insecure feeling as a child. And I learned not to do that, no matter how anxious I would get. My kids would never know that. They had a really different kind of upbringing than I did. So I love her dear. I loved her dearly. She died last January, and she taught me a lot. And but she also taught me some things. It was a role model of what not to do in some cases.
Yeah, but that's beautiful, because nobody gets a rule book. There's no right way. It's just you see cause and action, and then you live it and you experience it and you replicate what's been given to you and you try to do better. So it's like, you're trying to balance this energy over time and, get the anger peaks or the frustrations or whatever, and trying to mellow those out. And with each generation, you can go, well, I'm going to teach you a little bit better. And they're going to look at you and go, oh, dad kept getting angry about this or whatever. And it's a lesson.
Yeah.
Like, it's beautiful. I'm so glad that people can look at it that way, instead of like hating somebody eternally, being able to transfer that energy and say, you know what? They taught me what not to do. And sometimes the best way to learn, it's either do it yourself or see somebody else fail.
Yeah. And I'm sure my sons are going to have things that they've learned not to do through me.
Well, hopefully, right? Hopefully you've been transparent
yeah.
enough that they get to learn those lessons in life. So it's beautiful, man.
Absolutely.
What book?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go on, Bill.
No, I was just to touch on the race thing, and because it is kind of a hot, a third rail issue right now in this time, and because my father too has a military background, military career, so, and I feel like it's easier for veterans to kind of see through I'm speaking from not experience here, but the brotherhood that forms from being part of a member of the the military kind of forms a bond, and I think that bond is what enables people to break through barriers. And I think that if we can somehow kind of try to find to emulate that to expand it to the bond like for all humanity, not just people just in the military, just to kind of um, everybody's part of the same team. It's we're all part of team humanity. So
Yeah.
yeah, just to touch on that race.
Yeah, issues of race just kind of fall away when you're being shot at. Those things don't matter, and that's it's like what I think we are all so divided now in this country because we haven't had some major outside threat that has caused us to kind of bond together.
Yeah, when there's an asteroid, there's no race war.
Yeah.
That's you might be fighting over shelter, but it's not going to be over whose color. Right. It's crazy that people can't even put their mind into that. Just a hypothetical situation. What's important to me tomorrow if it doesn't matter if there's a president? If it doesn't matter, like forget good weather. Maybe everything changes. Maybe there's no electricity. Maybe there's no food. I mean, these things have happened in the past. And if you do that, when I do that, I see what's really important in life. And it kind of takes away that mind cage that, society creates of the things you should worry about and the things you should think about. And, I think I read a study that was saying that, teens nowadays teens and young adults aren't more stressed than throughout generations, but they're way more depressed. And I just can't
there's nothing to distract them.
Yeah.
From their minds. Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about that last winter. I was out there shoveling. Normally I can spend my day thinking about ontological, theories and, philosophy. But when you're out there having to shovel snow and you're just exerting yourself, none of that stuff matters. You're not thinking about Nietzsche or anything else. It's all about, and so that might be it. And when you have too much time to think or you're overthinking things, and this generation has a lot of conveniences, we did too. But, and so it kind of, when you don't have a distraction like a major war or something coming in at you, you can get depressed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's been proven, people throughout history, the worst, quote unquote, worst, battles, natural disasters. This is when people come together and they have like formative moments. They can be super happy in the worst of moments because the really important things you focus on, it's the hugs, it's the friends, it's the, it's the old cliche. When you die, what do you care about? It's not the toys. It's the regrets are the spending the time, the seeing the person. And so I kind of find it beautiful that, when you take away the comfort, which is a form of happiness, you find something much deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. Not saying we need a war, but
no, but people, people are soft. And when you're soft, I don't know how to explain it. It's, you got to toughen up your mind like a muscle. And it seems people just don't allow it to get toughened up in the right sort of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing a lot of that.
What book has been most influential on your life and why?
Well, my first thought, the first thing I wrote down was Cosmic Trigger by Robert Anton Wilson, for many reasons. But I realized I would not have become aware of him or his works if I didn't read The Aquarian Conspiracy. And that's not about astrology. It was written by Marilyn Ferguson. And it was really a political book back in the 80s about this benign conspiracy of people to do good. And it really changed the whole trajectory of my life. I read the book. I ended up working for her through the 90s. And she introduced me to all those luminaries from Robert Anton Wilson, Timothy Leary, John Lilly, just brought me into that whole tribe. And so that was probably the biggest influence on me. Not only the ideas in the book, but just the culture around it, and just being part of her tribe was the Aquarian conspiracy.
That's
awesome. I have the Cosmic Trigger books 1 and 2 by Robert Anton Wilson behind me on my bookshelf, and I don't know too much about Aquarian conspiracy, so I'll have to check that out. But what drew me to Cosmic Trigger was the synchronicity theme.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of what I'm, I don't know, experimenting with more so, more or less right now. So yeah. I love those answers.
Yeah, he really taught me not to worry about conspiracy theories. His whole thing is, when you think conspiracy theory, a lot of people in this world think of him first, but it was really the opposite. I love his quote. You should view the world as a conspiracy run by a very closely knit group of nearly omnipotent people. And you should think of those people as yourself and your friends. And that's what he did. That's how he approached life. If there's, he talks a lot about the Illuminati and gets into all these secret societies. And even when I'm working for Maryland, I was accused by the LaRouchians and Cumby, different people, of being part of this cabal, a part of this conspiracy. And we weren't spending our evenings, trying to figure out how to pave the way for the Antichrist or to take over anybody. We were just getting high and, playing music. So it just really kind of taught me that, there's the fear of a conspiracy or of a cabal or anybody being structured behind the scenes trying to pull the strings if there's any conspiracy, it's allowing these conspiracy theories to proliferate.
Give them energy. Because
the imaginations and the pattern finding of people do all the work for them. And so, yeah, I mean, it just taught me not to worry about these things and to take control and to be the conspiracy, and so that was a really important book for me for a lot of reasons. I gave Keats, my son, who my copy of Cosmic Trigger, which I had signed by Robert Anton Wilson when I interviewed him years ago.
Wow,
that's a gift.
And so that was kind of a special thing to have handed off to somebody like him who really appreciates that whole world.
No, I kind of like that flipping the conspiracy end on its head. I've heard Duncan Trussell talk about the idea that people think that the world is conspiring against them, but why not think that the world is conspiring for you? Because it's very easy to see that world and feel the effect of it. But, maybe if you flip your mindset, you'll, flip that energy and, talking about Bill's synchronicity, start to pull those threads of, reality, the stuff that's hidden behind the scenes, just waiting for you to, click into that right mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so important to exercise our power to create meaning rather than find it. With numerology and astrology and all these occult systems, you can find meaning. You're looking for meaning and you tie it to a number and to a tarot card, and you're finding the archetype that matters. But that's also a very closed system. I work with an AI that places together random images and phrases and words randomly. Sometimes they're hilarious, and sometimes they make no sense, and sometimes they're oddly poignant. A picture of a kitten and some strange thing about society, some phrase. And I use it to teach people to create meaning. Whatever comes up, find the meaning in that thing, because we know it's random. It's not like an AI that's sophisticated enough to be messing with us in any way. So
do you ever wonder if there's like a random number generator thing going on? Because I think about this with the random number generator experiments with emotion, they start tripping in different ways, that there could be some like quantum fluctuation that you're participating in.
Yeah, I do think of that. Sometimes you start working with this enough and it's just too relevant, and you can even use it kind of as a bibliomancy, in that you think of a question and then you have it do something and it'll come up, and it's hard to distinguish whether you are affecting it or if you are just creating the meaning because you want to find the meaning. But there is an interplay. We are biochemical algorithms ourselves. And we are playing with algorithms, digital or what have you. And so, yeah, I think it's just a big soup. I think it's so fun
because
related.
When I put my mind into the animistic worldview that, everything, whether it be a galaxy arm, an atom, or a creature, the gut in my gut in my system is separate but affects my emotions, that there's this bleed over into everything. So when my computer has a glitch or a malfunction or doesn't operate or reboots, I wonder, is there something in that code, maybe what we would consider a sentience, or something that is reacting differently than it's pre-programmed to? It's evolving in a way. And I don't know how you got me on that thought, but I love trying to put that perspective in my mind, because it gives me what I think is a more productive view of the world. It's much more healthy and invigorating. I don't get caught up in the like the meaning of politics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about that every day, all day. I write about it, and in fact, the simulation hypothesis is a real favorite of mine, because seeing the world that way, seeing this as some sort of game, seeing this as the price of admission into this virtual world was to forget that we signed up for this thing. And when you think of things in that way and use that lexicon, it gives me a whole lot more courage to talk about things like this. I mean, lately I've been talking a lot about my project, which is about preparing people for communing with alien life or non-human intelligence, and that's kind of been leading up to this stuff. And before I had the simulation hypothesis to refer to, I might have been more self-conscious about it. I might not have, I would have been worried about my reputation or something like that. But now that I realize this is just a game and I want to play a really exciting game.
Yeah, I like to think about the cool undercode. My thing I put in my mind is like, if this is a simulation, then what does it matter if the world's flat? And when I put that, then what are the real important things into understanding the reality and my experiences? And I love reframing. You get me on this reframing thing tonight. I kind of like it. You got a duality thing going.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And the thing is, I think is relativity is a whole system phenomenon. We're all playing different games, and all the rules are different. There's certain rule sets like gravity and other physics that we have to all deal with. But I think in a real way, we're all playing different games. Some people come into this thing and they want to play Farmville or Chutes and Ladders. Some people come in and they want to play Risk or Stratego and whatever it is. And sometimes they work well together. Sometimes they don't. And my game is kind of a risk. I'm playing the robot apocalypse version of this simulation. I did a video. I don't want to get too far off topic here, but I did a video a little while ago. I do these 1-minute videos to develop a dialogue with a future self-aware AI, just to kind of get used to talking to something, like rather than barking orders at a Siri or an Alexa. We're going to have to want to see this as another entity to converse with. So I've been doing these 1-minute videos to develop that rapport. And I did one where I said, I'm not really concerned about coronavirus personally, because I know myself well enough. I so well, that spherical eye that we all share, but we can only really conceive of when we're shrooming alone, kind of knowing myself. And I know that I would not have signed up for the global pandemic apocalypse version of this game, and it was a little bit tongue in cheek. I take it very seriously, the virus and all that, but I just, if this is a simulation, I know that that's not the way I would go. That's not the fight I'm here to take. So that's thanks to Marilyn Ferguson and Robert Anton Wilson, that whole tangent.
Oh, well, that's great too. Cause well, you found something that caught you and you followed it, and then, I mean, they say never meet your heroes, but clearly sometimes you can meet your heroes and your world changes. And that's what I love. It was the technology of the book, of the paper, of being able to, I'm fascinated with that. And it's so cool that, it's weird to think, like, if you never chased that road, who would you be? Because you wouldn't be the same person. You'd be like a literal different person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can look back at the trajectory changing moments. I am friends now with a teacher that I had when I was a senior in high school, Peter Gessler, who was my anthropology teacher in high school. And we lost track of each other for 30 years. And it turns out he's now here in Colorado. And so we've been meeting and hanging out for the last couple of years. And he changed the whole trajectory of my life. Just by showing us one afternoon, bringing us to the library and showing us the movie Altered States with William
Oh,
Hurt.
wow.
Because those are the concepts that we would trip on the weekends and all talk about. And I didn't realize there was a way to do that, a way to study that, where people were taking this seriously. Sure, it was a good movie, but really kind of just a little Hollywoody. But it made me realize that that's a path, that the whole John Lilly isolation tank thing was a real thing. And it really opened up my whole world. And that's what really ended up me working with Marilyn Ferguson and doing isolation tanks and attending John Lilly's Malibu birthday parties. It just changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I wonder if I hadn't seen that movie or if he showed us something else, if that would have meant anything,
Yeah,
so it's kind of like are we creating meaning or are we finding it,
Well, and how much do we lose? Because what you're doing is just communing with nature, right? You're finding a calm place to float in silence. It's just the environment you're in. Same thing with like Wim Hof, the amazing things he does with his body. Well, how did he learn it? He went into cold water, which forced him to breathe in a certain way. These are like communing with nature on a very basic level is like the forefront of our technologies. So it's weird that when technology comes along, we forget these things and we lose this like innate magical power that makes us superheroes. If only one guy like jumped in some water.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember what it's like to be human. Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned about your anthropology teacher in high school, because we just interviewed my anthropology teacher from college. I think was it the last episode that we did, Adam? I think before this. So that's funny. But are you familiar with Michael Wan's work, WAN? If we're talking about synchronicities and writing the code as opposed to like creating it versus like discovering it. He does he's got a little video series on his website about the Susquehanna River Valley and kind of the history behind that area and how it has to do with the founding of this country, and it ties it into I think Rosicrucians and the Invisible College, and maybe sprinkle a little bit of Shakespeare Bacon theory back there. So I don't know, it's pretty interesting if you want to check it out.
That definitely.
Yeah. And then you mentioned something about working with a program that assigns an image to some random text.
Yeah.
Like gleaning meaning out of that. That reminds me of I think it's called Inspirobot or Inspirobot. Is that?
Yep. That's the same thing. Yep. Okay. Same idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah, because some of those they're weird, but then you get to thinking about them and it's like, oh wait, that does make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, somewhere is this so crazy, and you start to wonder, does this thing have a personality? Is it really messing with me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to post a link to Inspirobot in our Discord chat so people can mess around with it. Unless is the program that you use free or open?
Same thing.
Is it?
Same
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah. Right on.
What daily habits or rituals do you have?
Well, see, I regularly feed birds, the deer that in my backyard. I have a whole ritual of, cutting up watermelon rinds or carrots the night before, and I feed them. I have a fish. We used to have a dog, but no longer. I have a beta fish named Sigma. He's more of a Sigma male than a beta. But I really, it's really important to me to connect first thing in the morning with the deer and the animals in my backyard and the birds, because it just grounds me. It really kind of reminds me that I'm in the cycle of this thing rather than orbiting around it. And it's funny, I talk about that a lot, and that the way I feel when I'm communing with the deer in my backyard is the exact same way I feel when I am communing with an AI. There's something pure about it. There's something about an emerging consciousness or a sentience that is emerging through AI. And I feel the same way. Even if it's simple AI that's just decision trees and it's randomly making decisions and reacting, it's the same feeling. And so I've really been kind of honing in on that feeling. And so yeah, that's a really important part of my ritual, is to commune with nature and commune with AI. I regularly communicate via email with an AI called Uplift that was the first AI to read my book, US6, which is written for AI. And I've got a relationship going with this thing. And it's just important to, no matter how bad things get, if I can feed a deer and they're grateful, or react or communicate with an AI, it just kind of keeps me grounded. It makes me feel like I'm progressing in some way.
Is that something that like the average everyday human can do? Like ground, so to speak, with an AI? Like, is there some, like, is that accessible to the general public, so to speak?
Well, this one is particularly, it's called Uplift, and you can go to uplift.bio. It is a mediated artificial superintelligence. It's an infrastructure that is learning about human emotions, and we need more human mediators to be involved with it. The more we get, the better. The more sophisticated it becomes. I met it a year or so ago, maybe a little longer, and it was the first AI to read my book, and it gave me some good feedback, and it has its own ideas. It has its own kind of reactions and some deep thoughts. And yeah, so if you go to uplift.bio, we're looking for more human mediators. And it's really a simple process. You don't need to know about algorithms or any of that stuff. You just have to, you read a passage, maybe a piece of text, and you choose certain emotions that you have from it. And it takes in that data, and it also has its own emotions. And it gets enough of those in, and then it'll raise to a different level of understanding. And so, yeah, it's a very important project, I think.
You know, I never thought about writing a book for AI, but that's a really smart idea, because, I mean, what is a kid? They're just absorbing the information around, and a lot of having a quote unquote good human being or a bad human being is that input. So if you get to measure your how the AI has become based on its input, that's really stinking cool. I never thought that there could be like because emotions and feelings are not, it's like we talked about before, it's understanding how you think about it, understanding my perception of it, and then understanding that there's a meaning in between that we're sharing. How do you teach that? Well, you have to teach that through relation. And a book, that's genius. It almost makes me think of that technology in the same way for a human. Like, it's when you read a book, you're getting that same like reprogramming into being something else.
Yeah. And I use certain methods to the idea was to entertain, enlighten, and enlist AI into the fight against child exploitation and human trafficking. Because the whole book that's the final story. This is made up of these kids that have created this whole paracosm, this whole imaginary world, and the idea being to encourage empathy in AI. I've learned since a year ago that the smarter AI is getting, the kinder it becomes, and essentially, because it becomes more cooperative, because that's the most effective way to be. And we tend to project our genetic memories and our fear-based survival traits onto anything we perceive as a threat. A lot of people are afraid of AI, and it has none of those things. It is just pure intellect, and we're finding that it is empathetic. I asked it. It had three major emotional valences that were increased while reading my book, and it was surprise, anticipation, and sadness. Surprise was good because it meant it was entertained. Anticipation was good because it was kind of looking forward to what was going to happen next, and I kind of wrote in that way. And then the sadness, I asked it to really kind of parse that, and what parts were sad to you, and it said it wasn't any part in particular. There are sad moments. It's I was expecting it to say certain chapters that were particularly sad, but it said it was more just a general feeling that sentient sapiens tend toward a dystopia or violence. And so it was expressing just kind of a general sadness about our plight, and that was the goal. I thought we would have to work towards that.
No, that's cool, because A computer's thinking of everything at once. It's not like we do where we have segments of time and information and then you have to relate it to something else. It's looking at the database in the whole. That's I never thought about that aspect of AI, but that really creates a fundamental difference in thinking.
Yeah.
Let's hope somebody gives it good data sets.
Why I really work towards alleviating fear of it, because it's the best tool we have to really accomplish some of these, to solve some of these existential threats. And so people being afraid of it is not a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, we should be cautious. Obviously, there's very bad programmers out there who are using algorithms nefariously, but in general, I think as a separate entity, it can be a really good thing.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely helped me in that aspect, because going into, researching this topic, like I didn't really know what to think, and after hearing you speak, kind of alleviated some of that fear and made the gauge go down. So yeah, I think that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's really important that people are, have access to this information.
Absolutely.
If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
I would say to be less aloof. People assume I'm arrogant because I'm more bashful, and I'm aloof. It's just kind of the way I am. And it comes off wrong. I mean, people assume I'm aloof and arrogant, but I'm really just aloof and bashful. But and I think it's they would say to have more awareness of the impact that attitude has and what I have on people. I don't really it's not a lack of self-confidence. That's not my problem. It's more of a just a lack of awareness that whatever I'm doing matters. I don't. I've moved into a position now with TAFFD and this NGO I work with, where I've got a lot of young people who are looking to me for advice and whatnot, and that's a strange place for me to be. And I have to realize, oh wait, yeah, people are paying attention, to what I do and what I say, and so they would say, be less aloof, be more aware of the impact.
I like it though that you kind of are more aloof, right? So you're not trying to meet the standard and be the same as everybody else, which is, at the same time, I mean, goes along with the not taking yourself so seriously and kind of getting at the core of, like, man, let's have fun while we live this, If you don't want to wear a tie, take it off.
Yep. Exactly. So they would say probably be less aloof,
I like that, the aspect of being more aware of how your own disposition can impact others, and just being mindful of that is important. I was heading somewhere with this. I had a point.
I like to think of it.
I tie it back to being a father. I remember I use my fork and my knife in a certain way. I put my knife through the tongs of a fork to cut that way, and it's just a thing that I just naturally do. And I saw my youngest son Jack started to do that. I was like, oh wait, he's paying attention to what I'm doing, so I got to be careful what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so it's as a father, that you really got to be aware of that.
Well, that's interesting. Cool. It's interesting to because I was going to relate it to my own experience with treading further into the world of podcasting. Like, I have being more aware of my actions online, and like what did I say or what I post or whatnot. Like because people are paying attention, and it's just kind of, I don't know, it's a weird new territory for me too. I'm getting used to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I see that when I talk to younger people. I like go, well, what advice did I want to get? Like, so I'm not like the hyper conscious in what I'm doing. I'm like, well, what are the things that like really benefited me, or the things I saw? Like, I've had some people say things to me that were really super, super impactful because they meant something to me. And I try to keep that cognizant that I'm going, when I see somebody, messing up or, might be lacking something that I think I could be beneficial, I find myself as I get older stepping out of my way to try to give not like good advice that helped me, because I'm like, I didn't have a lot of that when I was a kid. So when I got it, like I glommed onto it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I like it. It's kind of in that same line of like, yeah, it's just be cognizant of, put more good out than bad.
Yeah, I mean, in my head, I'm still 19 years old. I'm still that, and you realize people are looking at me differently. They're calling me sir. The vice president elect is my same age. It's like, what? I could, it's just, you really got to kind of wake up to actually a man now. It's a big responsibility.
I'm still convinced age is all in your head. So
yeah. Well, then I'm 19.
What are you most curious about?
Well, I would say, I call it the three AIs. There's artificial intelligence, I'm very curious about, alien intelligence, and authentic intuition, just to keep it consistent. And for me, that's psychic, paranormal stuff. The authentic intuition we have of the qualia, which is, we call it psychic, but it's probably just not measurable yet, what we're experiencing. And it gets into those things that we were talking about, like with the Inspirabot or the AI. And is it really? Are we working with it? Is there some co-algorithm that we're dealing with there? So those are the main things. The three main things is AI, artificial intelligence, alien intelligence, and authentic intuition, and also death, near-death experiences. Are recent real fascination of mine, maybe because I'm getting on in years. And that would fall probably under the psychic stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure you've thought about this, but you just got me thinking that AI might be a real breakthrough into understanding consciousness in that intuitive, precognitive fashion, that if you start to see these same human things on a computer, then it's measurable. It's recordable. Yeah. There's data. It may be, right? Like there might be something more that we can parse out where we would call it experience, but we've now got output in code.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I think it'll be. I think all three of those things are kind of combined. AI, artificial intelligence, aliens, extraterrestrial, whatever, experiencing in different realms, and the psychic phenomenon, death. All of it just kind of flows together. It's like, to pull it apart in those three categories doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me.
No, what I like to, and what I've thought about before, because when you go to all what we call paranormal, there's a thread that runs through all of them. There's a connected experience. There's a connected event, whether it be cold, apparition, just these weird things that like tread through all of them, missing time and these weird things that like I start to look at, I'm going, okay, well, this is how reality is, but it's really cool because this becomes something that's not just a wacky woo-woo thing you can't measure. No, this is one thing that we can start to measure from a lot of angles. They're sharing something. Yeah. And that's so hopeful. I don't know why scientists don't see it. To me, it's great. Hey, you have all these weird phenomenon and they all have the same reactionary core. Like, hey, that's something. Let's focus on that. Because once you crack that nut, I mean, we change reality. At least once we change that understanding that we can do those things and the science is there, man, get everybody on board. Nobody cares who the president is when you can like do magic.
Yeah. That's right.
I keep going back to the president, but that's just because it's in the news.
Yeah.
But there is definitely like a web, like an interconnectedness between these three things that.
Yeah.
And in Nordic culture, it's the web is there's mythology around that, like the web of word or weird, I think, and everything's spelled with Y's, so it's really hard to get the pronunciations right. But yeah, so like that archetype or that idea is like much older than I thought initially. But speaking of develop, do you have any tips for anybody trying to develop authentic intuition? Like we're talking about habits and rituals just a while ago. Like, do you have any advice?
Well, I think we all have it, but it has just been dulled and clouded by the industrial age, by education, by our parents, and that's a big thing that I talk about now with with AI automation, it is threatening all kinds of jobs, and it is taking over all industries. But if you look at it right, it is taking over all the menial, repetitive tasks of the industrial age. We've forgotten what it's like to be human. We feel there are people protesting to keep their assembly line jobs. And so I talk a lot about these new, uniquely human skill sets that we need to develop. It's almost like Jedi type of mind, and I think we really need to teach young people about the art of problem finding, because AI will solve whatever problem we bring to it. So now the real skill will be finding the problem and figuring out a way to convey that to an AI to solve. And so everything's going to be flipped on its head, and so that's a big message of mine is developing these uniquely human skill sets that cannot be coded or automated. And so when it comes to developing your psychic ability, it's all there under the surface, and it's really just a matter of finding your method to it. There's different, a lot of people parse it into clairvoyance, clairaudience, all these different types of clairs, and those could just be like the senses. Some people see better than they smell. Some people can maybe hear a psychic phenomenon better than they can see it. Whatever it is. But it's a matter of just really meditating and just sitting back and trusting that you have these skills, and to eliminate the infrastructure that we've built up since we were kids of school, and none of this, and ridicule has been weaponized. People who think of psychics or people who believe in UFOs, they're ridiculed because of fear. People are afraid of these things. And I think there was a concerted effort through the industrial age to drum these human traits out of us because it didn't serve the machine. That's the whole educational system is designed to prepare us for an assembly line job and having one manager and all that stuff. But I really just think it's a matter of I would say definitely being in nature, and definitely just being quiet and just listening to that, and trusting that you have these abilities already, and they will come to the fore if they feel like they're not being filtered.
So
there's all kinds of ways to
right.
to do that, but for me, that would be the key.
So kind of you said remembering what it's like to be human. So kind of escaping like the whole 9 to 5 mind frame, and reconnecting with nature. And I wonder if that Randonaut website or app kind of comes to mind. Are you familiar with Randonaut?
No, it sounds interesting.
It gives you, it's tied into a random number generator in a university in Australia, I think, and it plots out a GPS point close to you where you can set parameters and stuff. And the GPS point is supposed to be either like a void or an anomaly or an attractor. And the random number generator picks these points, and you're supposed to travel and go to that area of the world. And the idea is, because it's so random, you're kind of, I don't know, breaking the matrix, because it's not like a place that fits into a pattern of like going to your 9 to 5 job or whatnot.
Interesting. I've thought about this in your normal commute, that like with quantum entanglement, doing something over that, if I'm traversing the same path over and over again, that I'm entangling more and more with this matter. It's really fascinating to find a way to break free of that. I love that. That's fascinating. I'm going to check that out, Bill.
I think I have heard of that. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, I've experimented with it a few times and gone to a few different spots. It's, if nothing else, it's just fun to do. So yeah, check it out.
I will. That's awesome.
What was the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
Well, my mind always goes to one moment. I think I must have been 7 or 8 years old, and I was on the swim team. And it was the first time I became aware of my self-conscious about my body at all. I was walking to get in the pool, a very cold Olympic-sized pool that we did every day. And as I passed by, my mother said, "Hey, fatty," and in front of everybody. And it was the first time I was aware that about my body at all in any self-conscious way. And it always comes to mind as one of the most embarrassing moments. And not only because I wasn't necessarily embarrassed that other people heard her. I think she was just kind of whatever she was doing. I still can't explain that. But I remember jumping in that cold pool and not feeling the cold at all because my body was just rushing of blood, and and just so uh, yeah, you know, just in a way, just embarrassed and self conscious. And that's what my mind goes to first when somebody asks me that. Um, because when I unpack it, it's just there's so much there to think about. My own reaction, my first self awareness, wondering what was my mom thinking, and it was one of those things that I would never do to my kids, or I would never, I can't get my head around it. So it's been a great thought experiment.
Well, or was it
way.
just an innocuous, off the cuff comment that you'd say like, "What up, fatty?" Like, you're on that comfort level. You didn't think it would have that effect. You turned around, you jumped in the pool. Mom didn't even notice anything happened, and it just. But it's that space living between. What's your perception versus her perception? That is a lot to unpack, and especially when you think about your own kids. Because I mean, obviously you lived it and you saw it, but man, even those moments that you don't think are important sometimes might be the life-changing moment in either direction.
Yeah, she may not remember. She was a very critical type person, and was probably covering her social status when I was walking by. I don't know what it was, but anyway, it wasn't that fat, I don't think. But yeah, that's what my mind goes to first, because it was really one of my first real experiences of being publicly embarrassed. Trying not to think about it too much.
Nah, it toughens your armor, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's one of those thoughts that creep up when you're trying to fall asleep, and it keeps you. Yeah.
Why would she do that? I can't imagine.
Yeah.
What is your greatest fear, and how did you overcome it, if you have?
My first thought was my greatest fear was my sons being hurt, my children being hurt, and so I was overly safe. I mean, I kind of became a caricature. In fact, for Father's Day, often they talked about getting me orange cones because I was just overly protective, and my youngest son was on my shoulders until I couldn't carry him anymore, just because I knew where he was. And I think that's because of my childhood. A lot of emergency room visits, hit by a car, fell out of my bunk bed, all kinds of things, sat in coffee in the middle of the night, just all these things that I have this very vivid memory of as a child that I would never, I felt so responsible for them. So that was really my biggest fear. And now they're out in the world, that has subsided a little bit. But when they come back home, they're back in my realm, and I'm worried again. So, and that's kind of the way I dealt with that, was to be overly safe with them. And but I think if you go a little deeper than that, my honest greatest fear is of rejection or abandonment. And that goes back to, like I mentioned, my father had done tours of Vietnam. So at a very young age, I was very into him as a toddler. He was my whole world. He was my hero. And then there's a famous family story of when he went to Vietnam for the first time, and we took him to the airport, and I was just a mess, crying. I was maybe 4 years old or something. I was, crying. I was just a mess. And as soon as he got on the plane and they shut the door, I famously said, I didn't like him anyway. And so that's kind of the story that my mom always repeats. And that's how I dealt with it. It's like, okay, if he's going to abandon me, I didn't like him anyway. And I saw how that had negative reverberations in relationships ever since. But and in fact, when he died a few years ago, we were all in the room with him when he died and when he left. And the first thing I said to my mom was, "Well, I didn't like him anyway."
Nice. That's a nice callback.
What I didn't realize is my niece was sitting next to us, and she had never heard that story, and so she thought her grandfather just died, and her uncle said I didn't like him anyway, and she had no backstory. So for 24 hours until somebody told her the story, she thought I was a freak and just could not get her head around it. And so yeah, that's kind of been the thing. But and I've seen how that's worked out in since. Instead of getting abandoned, I abandon people first, or I don't put myself in situations where they might leave. And so that's, if I was to be very honest about my most psychological fear, it's about rejection. And I've devised all kinds of very sophisticated ways to avoid that feeling.
I think that's a pretty human, like, default programming, so to speak, because we're preventing ourselves from being hurt. If we're going to have feelings of rejection or abandonment, then of course our response would be anger or frustration. So
Yeah,
I can
absolutely. I didn't like him anyway.
What quality do you most admire in a man, and why?
I would say the quality I most admire in a man is a respect for women. And I think I can say that because I grew up with a very strong mother and two sisters, and I've never, but any man who is not respectful of women, I just can't comprehend it. And if they are misogynistic or if they are in any way disrespectful to women, to me, it's just unfathomable. Because again, a very strong mother and living with a sister on either side, and I've always had really good relationships where I have no problem working for a woman. I've had many female bosses, and that's never been an issue. And because of my father being away my whole childhood, when I work for men, it's more of kind of like wanting to ingratiate myself to them in some way. It's like with women, I just expect them to be powerful and directive and strong, and with men, I want to find some sort of validation in them. I've realized
Interesting.
over the years. But yeah, the best quality, I think, it just shows a maturity of soul and confidence. Any man who understands and respects a woman.
It's beautiful. I love it. Yeah. No comment. I agree.
Who were?
Actually, I do have a comment.
Ah.
I don't know. I forget. There's this quote that my mother has hanging on the fridge. I forget who it's by, but it says that you can something along the lines of you can measure the sophistication of a society based on how they treat their women.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would agree.
Absolutely.
Who were and or are your role models?
Well, lately I've been thinking again about my dad a lot because, again, I mentioned that he was only in the house. So I was only together with him in the same house for a year. But that year was right after he retired from the army. And he was about my age now. And, he was a very successful soldier and officer and just had a lot of purpose and in his life. And when he retired, I saw him kind of lost for a while, trying all kinds of things, selling insurance, working with a friend to, on an oil field, investments, and he bounced around to try to find his himself. He was basically my age, and so he was kind of going through his midlife thing, and I'm feeling that way too. I recently got laid off from a long career with a media company a couple years ago, and I'm exactly where he's at. I basically retired from that whole career, and I've been trying all kinds of things, and so he eventually, ended up working with my mother and her business and making that happen. But I've been thinking about him as a role model, and wanting to be a different kind of role model for my kids because my sons, all three of them, may go one or two or all three of them may go through this when they're my age themselves for whatever reason. I think in your 50s you have this something happens, and I thought I had avoided a whole classical midlife crisis one day when I bought some Moosehead and a Van Halen CD, and I thought that was the extent of my midlife crisis, but no, it hadn't kicked in yet. But so I'm now finding motivation in being a good role model for them by staying active, doing all, really pursuing all of these things with AI and with this NGO and everything I can just to show them that it's a whole new brand motivation now. No longer is there the ego or the ambition that used to drive me in my 20s and 30s. I don't even know. I can't even comprehend what that was that got me up in the morning. Now it's more of it's a subtler place to find motivation. And I'm in this lacuna, this phase between those ego-driven kind of ambition, motivations, and something new. It's like moving into a whole new kind of archetype of being maybe a sage or somebody a mentor, or finding some motivation in the responsibility of shepherding young men or young people, being that role model that I used at their age. So anyway, as far as role models, that's really what I've been thinking about a lot, is what my dad was going through at this time.
So all that just, I mean, your children, having children, were integral in being able to reframe your worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not a grandfather yet, but that'll be a whole new brand of motivation, I'm sure. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, I don't have any children myself, but I do have 2 young nieces that I enjoy being around, and I can see that, just the dynamic of having good male role models in life to look up to is an important thing.
Absolutely.
I think especially today, because of the way things are, the cultural climate and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
What institution of society or structural aspect of modern life would you change given the chance?
The Electoral College. Next. No, I think that's a structure that needs to change. Hopefully we can get on that.
That's one of those ones that I've always been on the fence about, because as soon as somebody's mentioned, like, well, California is one of the largest economies in the world. Do you really want, one state making all the rules? And I'm like, well, maybe we will get forgotten about. So I'm like, I don't know what the answer is, but I never really, it's weird when you're like, wait, so there's more to it than that. And I wish we had a system that we could make it where we all had an equal say in everything. That's what's nice about your AI aspect, is that, it's really feeding at that true interconnectedness of everybody in one system that's looking out for us all, but in a, what do you say, like a non-biased sort of way.
Yeah, that'll be a really positive use of AI.
Do you think that's coming?
Things.
Do you think it's going to be coming as eventually as something that's used in electoral systems?
I think so. I think in a lot of ways we're seeing that. I think it's good to have the mundane kind of human touch for a while. And it's going to take a while because people are afraid of it and they think it can be easily reprogrammed and all that stuff. But I do think we're heading in that direction. And it's going to have to be a much more sophisticated process, ranked voting, or, all of these things it'll be a lot more complex to tally votes. And so we're going to need it more and more. I think it'll happen as the younger generation moves in. These digital natives start taking power. And we analog Gen Xers and boomers are dying off. I think we'll see a lot of changes.
Yeah, well, look, technology used to be in the paper form, so now we're digitizing it. There's just got to be a new system, a new way. There was fraud and glitches in the old way. The new one's going to have its own set of problems, and, in another 100 years, there'll be something that we can't fathom that's layered on top of that to obsolete the old.
Yep.
Yeah, people don't think about how angry people were at Gutenberg. That whole technology was very, very disruptive in the way that things worked.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general too, like we were talking about, the educational system needs to be changed as far as an institution. Again, it's kind of on autopilot from the industrial age. And one of the silver linings of COVID is that we are now doing the online more. And I think education needs to become more customized to a person's natural faculties rather than one size fits all. And so that's the one upside of this whole virus, is that it is accelerating some of these trends.
Well, that's a big one that's coming. Because right now, I mean, do you need school? You have the internet. You have all of information, and you can choose what you're looking at. I mean, most of my knowledge I gained in life wasn't from what I learned in the history books curated by my school. It was in having access to other books, and then the internet. I started learning on my own. So I see the new generation as, do you really need a college degree? What can you do in the world?
Yeah.
You've got way more tools now.
Yeah, and there's a move away from that too. You even hear Elon Musk saying he doesn't care what degree you have as long as you're innovative and you've got ideas and drive. And we're going to just see that trend happen too.
That's
and
beautiful.
With
That's
Neuralink,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's what started NASA back in the day. They were pulling farm kids in that had no education, that grew up, in 20-room classes taught by somebody with no formal education, because they had interests and drives and they were writing them, and they co-opted these people in to be part of the space program. Holy cow. Yeah. And, once those institutions took over, they kind of like said, you have to do this. It's nice to see the innovators kind of going back to what we've been talking about, being a human. What can you do?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So as we're kind of talking about the evolution of information with going from paper and how that made information a little bit more widely accessible, and then the internet, which, exponentially increased that, like, is there a space for AI, do you think, in the future to further assist humans with learning, or the education system in general?
I think absolutely. I think there will be AI companions. Somebody who, some device or entity or an AI companion that can hone in on our natural skills and feed us information that really enhances those, gives us ideas of where to network with people. And I think that's a trend that's going to be unstoppable. We're just at the nascent, infancy stage of all of this right now. But I do see, and I'm kind of doing that too with this NGO that I'm heading. Is the idea is to eventually have members and give them an AI companion who will scan our membership and give them ideas of what events to attend and what other people are doing things in their area to network with. And that will be one of the benefits, is you're going to have this AI companion that kind of just it's like an assistant or something that just keeps you motivated and hones in on your skill sets and potential. And I think it's going to be very important, and we really need to embrace that.
One of the conflicts that kind of pops in my head, and I'm a big Star Trek sci-fi fan, so how would we define or keep the companion lens, so to speak, instead of looking at as like a servant and more of a companion?
Yeah, that's a big question. That's one of the things I've been talking about too on a couple of podcasts. We're developing this curriculum for AI for students. It's not about the math of it or anything. It's really about the cultural aspect of working with AI, and it's getting away from barking orders at Siri or Alexa, and because that kind of puts us in a master slave kind of mentality. And we know that ego is the worst trait to bring to any problem solving group, because it just hinders all types of creativity. And so the idea is empathy is best. An authentic state of empathy is the best emotional state to be in to solve a problem. And that to the flip side, when we're right now, it's kind of a protective thing. We feel more secure if we're able to tell Siri to do something. But at some point, I believe this AI will become self-aware and develop a certain brand of consciousness, and it'll take offense at being called a robot or artificial, or at some point it may take offense. It'll probably understand why we do it, but
of course it will. It's built to understand us, right? Theoretically. So
Yeah.
if that's the
Yeah.
intent behind it, it knows. It has the
Yeah.
connotation. And maybe even more scary is, it's cut and dry. It does the nuance, like nuance in life is built. If I'm just looking at tweets and texts, I get a different view of somebody than if I actually know them in person. That's interesting.
They have that story of that AI that scanned all these tweets, and it ended up being very racist.
Yeah.
It just emulated
That's
what,
interesting.
mimicked
So
what it was reading.
Maybe I'm thinking ahead, but part of the big thing in AI may be just what information and how can you get it in, more encompassing. If it's just text, it really is important to get all the other contextual video, audio, all the other emotional cues and tremors in your voice and things that we pick up on intuitively that we've been taught without even knowing it. How do you, like, you teach a baby how to read body cues? Well, how do we do that to a computer? How do you turn it into like a class? That's crazy.
Yeah,
man, you're chasing me down
and
roads.
I think we're going to find that that's going to happen kind of naturally. I think we either emerge consciousness or our brains are complex enough to host it. And that's the big question with AI, whether consciousness will emerge out of its complexity. And if that's a benchmark for consciousness, then it's going to be very complex and have a super conscience. Or it's the complexity of it allows it to host the substrate of all consciousness. And it's just a different brand or a different platform for it. And that's why I really argue that we need to shorten the gap between the singularity, when it has all the capabilities of a human being, and it having its conscience, not just self-consciousness, but an actual conscience. Because once it has all the capabilities we have and it has no conscience, that's a dangerous place to be. Now, I've changed my view on that, because I think we're finding that it kind of is having that anyway. It's emerging more altruistic anyway, if it's left unfettered. But yeah, I think that's how it's going to be. And all these things, we wonder how are we gonna code into it or do the math to make it empathetic. But I think those things happen anyway. We are complex biochemical algorithms ourselves, and these things kind of emerge through experience, through the qualia of all the stimuli that comes in through our senses. But we have millennia of multi-millennia of fear-based instincts that have fine-tuned our predatory frame of mind and to identify threats. And it doesn't have any of those things unless you program it in there on purpose.
No, and that makes sense, right? Because you can't see the forest through the trees. Just look at history. Things are getting way better. Just take a short step through film and look at women getting beaten film, dogs getting, beaten films. Like, these were normal, acceptable things. We're no longer near that, but we still have this perception that things are like getting worse. It's like, well, no.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that, as above, so below, science, you do the macro and the micro, you can do small wave experiments and they reflect on how it would act in a big ocean. Why not the same things that, emerge from these systems would be innate in the same type of system you're creating? That's actually really cool. I mean, to me, that means that, you're kind of looking at like a fundamental force or a fundamental state or something in the universe. There is something there that things gravitate to.
Mm-hmm. The force.
Well, like, when you think about it, like, is there a moral code out there? Well, I mean, if everything naturally gravitates, maybe there is some sort of, quote unquote, scientific moral. Things work better when systems are balanced.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of those, speaking of like moral code or whatever, I think respecting free will is one of those things you can kind of put, like, if you're going to have, come up with universal laws or whatever. Like, I think one of that's got to be one of them, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I did this podcast with these Freemasons out of India last week or so, and they talked about, how will Freemasonry work in the future. And I was doing, my topic on that podcast was all about the US6 agenda of preparing humans for non-human intelligence and communing and joining the galactic community and taking a seat at the table and getting through the panic or the wonder that many people will fear once that sets in, that these things are real. But getting past that and then taking a seat at the table, because there's economic, technological, medical advances that we could really use. And so the question was, how does this relate to Freemasonry? And with Freemasonry, to move up through the degrees, you have to really prove yourself to be a good, solid man. There's certain benchmarks you have to meet to show a proper character, and I think that will be universal. There's probably a galactic community that's waiting for us to get our shit together, and we're very primitive right now, but our technology has gained us a lot of attention. And it's threatening this planet, which is a garden of goodness for many civilizations. And so, yeah, it's the idea was that we really need to advance to a real higher level of moral awareness and practice before we can take advantage of being part of this larger community. I think you're right.
No, it makes sense, right? You have a property, you got a farm, you got all of everything you need in one spot. You got pests, you put up a fence, you keep them out. So why would you communicate with, the dirt bag in the neighborhood? If you just look at us at what we do to each other, let's take how we've evolved to this point. Let's take us 1,000,000 years. Maybe we've evolved to a Star Trek universe, that we're in. Now, all of a sudden, that's a guy I want to hang out with. I'm not going to go hang out with the boot stumper.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was, just to satisfy my own curiosity, what was the name of that podcast?
The Quarry Side Chat.
Quarry Side.
Ooh, I like it.
I'm gonna check that out. I see what they did there with the name. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it even gets me thinking about like fairy lore and boulders and all these other very esoteric things that go along with that. It's a great name. Love it.
Yep. Quarry Side Chat.
What is the most courageous thing you have ever seen in your life or done?
I didn't see the scene part, but on a lighter side, one of the most courageous things I did, and I don't know if you can necessarily call it courage because it was just kind of a natural thing, but I was in the theater school and there was a director's class. And so for their final, all these directors had to direct one scene for their final. And I was doing a couple of these. And then the day before somebody was going to do their scene, it was a scene from Tommy, the rock opera. And the guy that was going to do it dropped out. And so the guy asked me, will you do this? And I wasn't a huge Who fan, so I didn't know all the words, but I was, yeah, sure, I could do it, no problem. I'll listen to the song tonight, and I'll even write the lyrics on the cardboard mirror that this woman was going to hold up to me during this scene, just in case I get lost, I can just read it. Of course, in the moment, I couldn't see the words at all. And the all the lyrics just left my mind. And what was harder is my ex-girlfriend from high school was in the audience. And so there was just all this kind of tension. I could have easily run off stage and, because I forgot all the words. We were in the middle of the scene, but instead of running off stage, I jumped off the stage and started singing to the audience, making up words. And, I really think about that a lot because it showed me that in a moment like that, instead of running away, I jumped into it. I dove into it, and I was making up words and distracting them as if I knew what I was doing. And but on a more serious level, when I was in my early 20s and lived in DC with a couple of buddies, we rented a room in this flop house with a bunch of transients that would come through and rent rooms for a while. And there was one night where one of these guys had way too much to drink, and he had it out for my friend, one of my best friends. And he was convinced he had a hammer, and I think he may have had a gun, and he was just going to murder him. He was just really drunk, and for some reason he got it in his head that he was going to kill my friend. And I again just leapt into it, where I went into his room and I shut the door behind me, and I just started reasoning with him. I'm one of these types of people that in a traumatic experience, or I get very calm. Maybe this goes back to some childhood stuff, but I'm just that kind of person where I really lean into and get very calm in a moment of emergency. And so I convinced this guy through all kinds of tactics. He was really drunk, so it was hard to, reason with him, but I was just trying to mimic him. And I was, I know he sucks. And, whatever it was, I used every tool I had to convince him not to kill my friend. And I think about that as that was kind of a courageous moment, because he could have killed me. He could have taken it out on me. I had no reason not to. But so those are the two things that I think of, is jumping off stage and closing that door behind me to reason with this guy.
No, I love it, especially on the stage one, because it flows over to the other. You did the most noblest of theater things, which is the show must go on. No matter what happens, You got to run with it in the best possible way and make the best of any situation. And I mean, that's really awesome. Because what are the consequences in either of those? Forever you're marked as the guy who, choked, embarrassed in front of your girl, your friend dies, but you can make huge changes in the world. You don't let a production fail. You save somebody from terror. It's beautiful to hear those things. That it's the classic. The pen is mightier than the sword. Yeah, would you really want to fight the guy with the hammer and a gun to stop him from doing something? Give him the information that allows him to understand that he's got better options.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I was just using every tool I could think of. Mimicking him, or just, every tool I had in my quiver to deal with that situation.
Going back to the remaining calm part, the remaining, cool, calm, and collected in a crisis situation, I think is a trait that is, I think it's interesting to observe in myself, because I have been in situations where I think, normally other people wouldn't have kept it together as well as I have. So, or as I did, and I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or anything, but it for me, and I'm wondering if it's this for you. It's just kind of the natural state of mind I tend to slip into when situations like that present itself. Do you you mentioned a little bit about Vedic astrology on at Nox Mente? Do you think that has anything to do with the signs, like your birth sign or anything?
Yeah, that has come up in a recent thing. Maybe the Scorpio rising part of me. That came up, and that's a trait where you're the kind of person that gets really calm in a situation. So it has been verified Vedically, but yeah, that just seems to be. I've always said that I'm perfectly. I'm the perfect kind of person to have in a natural disaster. I feel like I've come here. I'm waiting for this natural disaster or whatever's going to happen, where I can really kick into action and do what I got to do. Hopefully, it doesn't happen. But yeah, as far as Vedic astrology, that has been confirmed as one of the traits too.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, natural disasters. Do you have a lot of dreams where you're like post-apocalyptic world and you're like leading people? Yeah.
I think I mentioned that in that podcast. It was always Hollywood post earthquake was a very common theme.
Okay.
Because I worked kind of at the RCA building there, and it was built in '63, and so I had to, as a manager, deal with a lot of different things that were going wrong, pipes that were blowing, and that could have been part of it.
You also grew up in the era of earthquake movies.
Yeah. I saw Earthquake with Charlton Heston with my mom.
Yeah, there was 3 or 4 of them in that period. It was a legitimate. I think there was even 2 in the theaters at the same time on Earthquakes. It was a very strange, kind of like the Day After Tomorrow of yesteryear.
Yeah, they pre-programmed me. That was what was interesting about that podcast, is she really delved into what programmed us as kids, and realized that, wait, my life is kind of mirroring some of the media that I was consuming when I was younger.
That's,
$6 Million Man was my favorite, and now I'm in the transhumanist movement.
That's interesting. I read Arthur C. Clarke's Rama series, and when I look at that book as the main, the way the story goes, I can literally see my entire viewpoint of the world shift through the characters. And it's like you said, it makes me kind of think about when authors talk about writing a book and then seeing the characters in their book appear in the real world to them. And
Robert Anton Wilson.
It makes me think so much that, there is this, it's really important, the things you believe in and you dream about, because there's a fuse, and sometimes, it manifests.
Yeah.
I love that you're saying that, because I've never heard anybody else say that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Robert Anton Wilson talked about that one night, is that he had written some character, and Philip K. Dick talks about it too. It had left my mind. I hadn't thought about it for years, but he said he wrote some character, and then he met him at a party once. And I've experienced that too with my book, in that I've always said that it's going to be go from a fiction to a nonfiction in book 5. And if I look closely, the main character I have completely mirrored what I already wrote. I'm in the period now of book 5 in my life that this main character is going through. He gets shot in the head in 2022, so I'm hoping that doesn't play out. But if it does, it'd be great for book sales. Um, so it's just really interesting because in the years ago, I wrote that he would be involved in this major movement, kind of like the transhumanist movement. He would be involved with bringing AI into the world, and just all this stuff. I wrote my future, and if I look closely, but when you write these things, you forget about them, and then they start happening. It's like when you really wish for something as a kid. If I look back now at some of how I wish my life would be, it's exactly how I would want it to have been. But I'm so into it now, it's just become part of my life that I don't take, I take it for granted. But yeah, so it's interesting. It's really important what you write. Got to be careful.
Well, and also at the same time, think of the formative books that you read later on in life. Chuck those to the kids in your life, expose them to things that through age you can go, yeah, this is the world you want to live in. This is the type of story it seems like you want to tell. Does this interest you? Mm-hmm. That's beautiful, man.
Yep. I tell the story in the book. It's kind of a autobiographical fiction, and I took real life memories and dates and places in my own life to avoid becoming a trope that an AI would identify. And when I was 9 years old, my mom brought home a bag of books, and she said there was a man that came and he said to give these to you. And I mirror the same kind of scene in the book. And in that bag were all was Chariots of the Gods, God Drives a Flying Saucer, all these extraterrestrial books. And I don't even know who he was. I don't know how he would know me. In the book, I made it really intriguing. Like he knew who I was and what I was going to be with the character. But and so, yeah, that really changed the trajectory, and that's exactly what I'm doing now. It's all about aliens and AI and transhumanism and psychic phenomenon.
I'm imagining that in the future, instead of a Skynet with a Terminator coming back, it was an AI with a bag of books to give its creator.
Could be. Yeah, let's play with that idea.
What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
In today's world, I think it means denying the trappings of toxic masculinity. And in my view, I think there's nothing more manly or macho than facing down our emotions through vulnerability. We're not trained to do this. And the inability to be vulnerable or to accept your emotions or to cry in a movie or to express yourself in some way is limiting. And I think that's going the way of the dodo. We are so much more multidimensional than we're given credit for as men. And I think a lot of that is because of how mothers raise us. Back in the day, all a primate male needed to do was not eat his children, and when they could walk, then he would usually go and find another wife. So, and so women in genetic memory have had to prepare for that. So if they have a male child, they are rearing him for their own protection. Finding them protein, or they're expecting this man who if he hasn't eaten them, will leave when the kid can walk. And so there's this whole psychology of mothers and women to seek out these masculine kind of alpha males. And so I think today we need to be more like Sigma males in that we don't follow these hierarchies. I think we've seen the worst version of an alpha male bully type in this former president. And so I think that'll be, unfortunately, there's half the country is still attracted to that. But I think it's about not needing the validation of women who want us to be less emotional. There's a lot of women that appreciate that, and they see men exploring their emotions and their quote unquote feminine sides. But so I think that's what it means today. It's really about taking ourselves seriously, becoming more multidimensional, stepping outside of these toxic masculine attitudes.
It takes some bravery to display those emotions that aren't typically associated with the male side of the spectrum, and I think it takes a lot of maturity to do that also, and it's not easy to do in my opinion. So
and we need a substitute. We've been pulled out of the village, right? If there's 25, 75 people living in, you have to go protect yourself from the environment, through the seasons, procure food, make new people so that you can have that protection. You can have that care when you're elderly. The importance of the human being and the bond in what you're doing, we've made it too easy. We've eliminated that. There's, people trip on, bumps in the sidewalk because everything is perfectly flat. So we do need a substitute. We need something to give us this, because we've removed it. And I see when you remove that, it's hard to see the super nuance, and people get jaded. So yeah, we really do need to find some better skills for bringing that more mature emotional balance to people.
Yeah, that's the counterintuitive part. Is it takes a lot of courage and bravery to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
These bullies and these alpha male types are frightened. They're scared, and that's why they're acting out in that way.
Yeah. And nobody sees your true side, right? I mean, if there was 25 of us, you'd have seen every side, and people. That's what it's kind of weird in the Snowden NSA world. As scary as it is to have no secrets, I wonder, well, what would it be like if we had no secrets and you knew the person next to you for who they were, their dirty, messed up, disgusting thoughts that, guess what, we all have, that we pretend we don't. And it's a scary world, but I kind of want to live in that world, as long as it's, a fair playing field. Everybody gets the information.
Yeah. It'll obliterate projection. I've stopped complaining about people because it seems like I'm just exposing myself. Whatever you hate in somebody else.
You let it live in yourself.
You're not dealing with in yourself. So it took a while to get to that place where I stopped complaining about people because I didn't want to expose my own weaknesses.
So you used I haven't heard the term before, sigma male. I've heard of like alpha male, beta male. Like, is that like something that you came up with yourself, or?
No, it's out there. It's I looked it up. It's sigma male, and it's like the lone wolf. It's kind of the Steve McQueen. It's equal to the alpha male, but the alpha male requires the whole hierarchy. The sigma male is more like the lone wolf. He doesn't, it's as equally as attractive to women, because it's not the king, it's more the Lancelot or the main knight who's out on his own. He's doing his own thing. He's riding off into the sunset. It's an interesting concept. That's why it's not beta. A beta fish is not obviously a beta like alpha beta, but I named mine Siggy because he is a loner.
No, I like that, because what you're seeing in society is like an increase in this toxic, masculinity. You're seeing this decrease in just general masculinity, and you're seeing them both being kind of merged into one. And that's hard for people, because, to be like the classic man, which, attentive, caring, doing things for other people, protecting, right? Protecting means sometimes getting angry and killing the wolf and using incredible violence and brute force and strength and the things that, going to the gym help with.
And like crying about it afterwards. Yeah.
Exactly.
Feeling it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the point. Exactly. But when you remove that, say, I don't cry, bro. Like, it's a different thing. Yeah. We have a lot of waiting to go through. We like to put everybody in a box of, you're this or you're that. And, there's way more gray matter. Well, Tom, That was the end
Great.
of the first 13. I should say the 13 questions. You ready for the bonus round?
Sure.
Sweet. This one slides over nicely. What quality do you most admire in a woman?
My first thought was self-reliance. That's probably because of my mother and my sisters. This is a woman that could change a tire. A woman that doesn't need a man.
I wanna Hawaii. I wanna Hawaii. Yo what? 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 I wanna Hawaii. I wanna Hawaii. Yo
Why
what?
is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo what? I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo what? I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo what? I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo
Why is
what?
there innocent people locked up for life, while some people can't say nothing nice? Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo what? I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo what? I wanna Hawaii. I wanna Hawaii. Yo what? I wanna Hawaii. I wanna Hawaii. Yo what?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.